Happy Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome to reading. All right, so we're going to get started with Module 4, Lesson 2 today. We're going to get ready to read The Hope Chest by Karen Schawabach. So let's get started. You're going to have some vocabulary for this lesson. You'll find it posted with the material on the lesson on Google Classroom. So our vocabulary today is variety. It means options, choices, many different kinds. Story elements, you'll hear this word a lot. It means the setting, the characters, the plot, conflict, and resolution within the story. Idioms, not idiots. They're an expression whose meaning is not predictable from the usual meaning of its elements. So like kick the bucket, raining cats and dogs, happy as a lark. These things are idioms. They follow general grammatic rules of language, but it's a larger expression. An adage, it's a traditional saying, kind of like a proverb. It expresses a common experience or observation. Figurative language. Remember in our classroom, when you're by our library up in that top corner, all of those posters are all about figurative language, hyperbole, simile, metaphor, onomatopoeia. They're language that contains or uses figures of speech, most particularly metaphors, things that use like or as in a comparison. A proverb, it's a short, popular saying, usually of unknown origin. We're not really sure where it came from, but it expresses effectively some commonplace truths. So an example of, here I have some in my notes. So an example of an adage is fish and visitors stink after 3 days. Meaning if you have a fish sitting around for 3 days, whew, if you have a visitor hanging around your house and they kind of overstay their welcome, whew, they stink too. After 3 days, fish and visitors stink. Okay, so let's think about what do underlined words mean. I can use a variety of strategies to help me understand the story elements in the beginning. Variety means many different kinds, and based on our vocabulary, story elements mean characters, setting, events. So let's think about our learning targets for a minute. I can explain how the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920 using details from the moving on up section of the text, Order in the Court. And I can use a variety of strategies to help me understand the story elements in the beginning of the Hope Chest. Okay, so I want you to take a look at this timeline that's on my next slide. So here we have the Declaration of Independence being written in 1776. The US Constitution gets ratified in 1787. And then we come all the way down this timeline to 1848, where there was a Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls. So the Women's Rights Convention was a gathering, everybody was trying to push for women's rights to vote. They thought it was unfair that the only people who were allowed to vote were men in this case. So if you follow the timeline really carefully, here we have 1865, where the 13th Amendment becomes a law. The 13th Amendment was when we freed the slaves. So now we have African Americans who are no longer bound by slavery in our country. Next, the 14th Amendment gives the African Americans rights to citizenship. 72 is down here. Susan B. Anthony and 13 other women went and voted in an election. And this was like mind-blowing, because the fact that women thought they could walk in and vote in an election, and it was a presidential election to boot, was insane. So of course she gets arrested. Here in 1873 is the trial of Susan B. Anthony. And that's when she said that speech that you guys read yesterday. Then we come across here to 1878, and the Congress rejects the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, which is the women's right to vote, the 19th Amendment. And you come all the way over here So after she's given her speech and she's pushed for the women's right to vote in 1878, it goes all the way until 1920 when we finally do afford women the right to vote. 1920, guys, it's only 2020. It's only been 100 years since women have voted. It's not that long, especially in history. Okay, so what do you notice about what happened after Susan B. Anthony gave her famous speech? Think about it for a second. If you said something like this, after she gave her speech, there was an amendment named after her, but it was rejected by Congress. The 19th Amendment passed, giving women the right to vote in 1920. And like we had said before, a long time passed between when she gave her speech and when women finally got the right to vote. So women spent a long time fighting for the right to vote, and this is what was called women's suffrage movement. In this unit, we're going to read a piece of historical fiction set in 1920 during the passage of the 19th Amendment, also named the Susan B. Anthony Amendment. Throughout the novel, you're going to learn about the passage of the amendment, but it's going to be helpful to have a little bit of background knowledge before we really dive into the book. So for the remainder of this unit, we're going to be working on a variety of text, and we're going to focus on moving on up. So this is located in the materials section for your lesson, and you're going to locate the copy and the part of the text that's called Order in the Court, and you're finding the yellow box titled Moving On Up on page 4. It's going to look like this. So take a minute and you're going to read this to yourself and then come back and pick up with the video. Okay, so take about 5 minutes to read the text, record the gist, and think of what this section is mostly about. 2 to 3 sentences, not a summary. Go ahead and do that now. Okay, some of us will share our gist statements on Zoom later, so be prepared. If you wrote something like this, then that's really wonderful. It tells us about how people worked together to get the 19th Amendment passed in 1920. You could also write something about President Wilson and lots of other people working hard to help pass the amendment. Okay, so now I'd like you to reread the text one more time. Remember that when you summarize informational text, sometimes readers need to find main idea, chunk the text, and then use those chunks to help write out a summary. Think about the way we write an essay. We write it little piece by little piece by little piece, and then we put all those pieces together to make one big essay. It's the same as gists, chunking, and then having a big summary or main idea. So inside your module notebook or on a piece of paper, whatever you have handy, because remember that I'm working here with you guys, and this is like my module notebook. I want you to write a brief main idea statement about what you've read inside your module notebook. It should take you 5 to 10 minutes, not very long, a couple of sentences, 4 to 5, maybe 6, nothing too crazy. So come back after you've written your summary and come join us back in the video. Okay, so my little buddy here wrote out his summary, and he said they both say that because of the work women did during World War I, President Wilson supported Congress in approving a constitutional amendment guaranteeing women the right to vote. But there had to be 36 states who approved. The vote was so close that it came down to one man in Tennessee who changed his vote in favor of the amendment for it to pass. Can you imagine something this big, this profound, this historical, passing by one vote? It almost didn't happen. And it's like, wow, that's crazy. So make sure that you have a clear understanding about suffragists and their supporters and how they endured years of hard work and challenges to get the 19th Amendment passed. And I mean, I always love actual pictures. So here are some pictures of what the suffragists looked like back when they were trying to get the 19th Amendment passed. If any of you have watched Mary Poppins, The original one, the mom comes in and she's got the sash and she's singing and she looks very much like these women dressed here in white. She was a suffragette. She was fighting for women's rights. So if you have some free time, go check out Mary Poppins, and you'll see in the beginning of the movie, the mom. Because of their perseverance, which means that they don't stop trying, they keep persisting, President Wilson changed his mind and supported equality for women. Woohoo. Okay, so we're going to begin to read a novel about this historic vote in Tennessee and the journey the suffragists endured to ensure the passage of the 19th Amendment. So our story takes place in Tennessee. This is the cover of the book. It's on its way to school for you. If you do not have a copy yet, you have a couple of options. I, of course, always purchase the book on my Kindle so I can read it with you on the computer. You can choose to wait until it gets to school, and when it does, I'll send you all an email that you can go and pick it up, or you can just follow along with me on the computer because I'm going to be reading it. I would love for you to read independently, but if it's too difficult, the vocabulary words are hard and the context is hard, and it's easier to listen to me read to you, I'm okay with that. There will be chapters posted on YouTube and you can follow along. We're going to read chapter 1. So if you're in this lesson with me and don't have the book, you're going to have to hop between our YouTube and the lesson so that you can hear me read the pages and then come back to do the work. But I have faith in you guys. I'm sure you could do it. Okay, so here we go, launching our new novel study, The Hope Chest, Chapter 1. I want you to think about what you learned about Susan B. Anthony and her fight for women's rights. Susan B. Anthony and other women fought for the women's right to vote. She was arrested because she voted in a presidential election. Her trial was unfair because you have to remember, not only was she a woman and had no rights, but she was also African American and had no rights. So when you have a double negative, you're in a lot of trouble. Her trial was unfair, but that didn't seem to stop her. She died before her dream could become a reality, but even after she died, people carried on her fight. Okay, so coming around, oh, that makes me sad as if we were still in class. Coming around is your copy of The Hope Chest. I'm going to read the back cover to you so you can get a feel of what the novel is like. So turn your books to the back cover, and I'm going to read it to you. Okay. If you actually had the book in your possession, this is what it would say. When 11-year-old Violet runs away from home in 1920 and takes the train to New York City to find her older sister, who's a suffragist, she falls in with people her parents would call the wrong sort, and end up in Nashville, Tennessee, where suffs and antis are gathered, awaiting the crucial vote on the 19th Amendment, which is the women's right to vote. So there's these two words that I have dark bolded, suffs and antis. Suffs and antis. What do you think the novel is going to be about based on what I just read you? Think about it for a second. So if you said something like my little girls here, we think that this book is going to be about a girl named Violet who goes looking for her sister who is fighting for women's rights to vote. Great job. Are there any words that maybe seem unfamiliar to you? If you said you didn't recognize suffs and antis, that's great. But I think we can figure out that these are probably two nicknames for the groups. Suffs would be the suffragettes, and antis would be the people who are opposing them. What do you infer about the meaning of these nicknames? Let's make an inference. Let's draw what we know and make a logical conclusion. Suffs is an abbreviation of the longer word suffragettes. The second is a nickname. Anti is a suffix that means not or against. So that would be a nickname for people who are against the suffragettes. Let's put it in our notebook. So what you should have in front of you is your module notebook. Mine is right here. And yesterday, we wrote down talking about a leader of change. Today, we're going to talk about Thrs and antis. They were nicknames for people who were fighting for the 19th Amendment. S-U-F-F. I'm looking for the spelling, so I spell it correctly. Suffragettes. S-U-F-F. I thought I had it somewhere, and I don't. S-U-F-F-A-R-G-E-T-S. I'm going to look it up after. Anti. Against. Okay. And let me come back to our lesson. Okay. S-U-F-F. Oh, I forgot the R. R-A-G. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so think about it. How might your knowledge of Susan B. Anthony and the suffrage movement help you better understand this novel? If you said something like, I can share a lot of information that we've learned, how it may help me better understand events and characters. Anybody can share anything about Susan B. Anthony? Maybe some of you went onto the computer yesterday and searched her and did a little research. Maybe you know things about her that you could share. My little guy here says, background knowledge will be a helpful tool as you read the novel. You have another tool for helping understand, and it's called the Reader's Guide. So in your materials section, I want you to look at the guide and think about what you notice. So it looks like this back here. My little guy is standing in front of it. And the Reader's Guide has a section called Historical Information, a glossary section with figurative language and definitions, and a place to summarize chapters and text-dependent questions. So the Reader's Guide is going to be very helpful to you. Each chapter is going to have a reader's guide that will summarize each chapter, help you keep track of characters, what's happened to them, and where they travel during the story. So it's almost like we're making a roadmap as we're reading the chapters together. So as with any piece of historical fiction, the characters in our book are imagined, and the events are going to blend with a historically accurate setting, events, characters, dialogue, and language. So this is a historical fiction text, one of my favorite genres. The characters will be pretend, and the setting will be accurate, but some of the stuff inside is going to be fictional and made pretend, so it's a little bit more exciting. Not that the women's right to vote wasn't exciting enough. Okay. So throughout the text, the author mentions many historical people and events that are not central to the story, but will add to the historical accuracy of the story. To help you with some of the historical background, the Reader's Guide has a section that explains these events and people so that you're not confused. Notice that the historical background information section tells you that you should read this section before each chapter. So it's important, let me show you what it looks like. So it's important that you read the background information before we read the chapter. Many words and terms might be unfamiliar, and that's because these words are from this particular time period. So what you need to do is, when you're reading, look at the glossary. And sometimes a figurative and complex language will be in that section. This is a great example. So here's our glossary on the side. A bank, a river or stream. Defeated, when something fails. Ratification, it's to approve in a formal way. That's when the government approves something. And then it gives you examples of what it looks like inside the text. So let's go off of ratification, to approve in a formal way. Here, the example of figurative language is that it was a huge knockdown, drag-out fight, an extremely harsh or violent argument. So let's review the process of using a glossary. This would have been a big chart up on the front of our classroom, hanging from the ceiling or something, so that we could always refer back to it. I'll take this and I'll post it up in the materials section on our classroom so that you can refer back to it also. Read the text. When you come to an unfamiliar word, use your context clues. If the context isn't enough, use the glossary. If the glossary isn't enough, we're doing online learning, you have access to the computer. Go over, type the word into dictionary.com, find out what it is. You have all this access and opportunity, so let's use it. Not every word is going to be in the glossary, but I think you guys are pretty smart enough to figure out context words that don't make sense. How about some vocabulary strategies? Again, this would be a chart up inside our classroom. Read the text. Look in the glossary. Use text features to help define the word. Look in a dictionary. Think about parts of the word that you do know, the root words, the prefixes that come at the beginning, the suffixes that come at the end. Discuss a word with somebody. If you're not taking a test and you can have a conversation, look up at your dad and say, hey, Pop, what does that word mean? Maybe you can explain it to me. Okay, there are many types of figurative language, which is made up of words and phrases that exaggerate or change. In this novel, you're going to read a lot of idioms, a lot of adages, which is why they're in our vocabulary today. Idioms are expressions that cannot be understood by reading the words. You have to infer meaning based on the context. Raining cats and dogs. Rings a bell means, oh yeah, that rings a bell. Something that's familiar to you. Off the top of your head. It means first thing you can think of. So quick, right off the top of your head, what's your favorite fruit? That's an idiom, that expression. You're having a ball, means you're having a lot of fun. Are you really like sitting there with a ball in your hands? No, you're running around the playground having a lot of fun. You're having a ball. These are examples of idioms. Adages. They're short but memorable sayings. Sometimes they're called proverbs. Actions speak louder than words. Ooh, I say that one all the time. That's a perfect adage. My eyes are bigger than my stomach. Again, guilty. My eyes are always bigger than my stomach. Early to bed, early to rise. Examples of adages. People who lived in the early 1900s used these types of figurative language. And this can be confusing when reading because you might not be totally familiar with these sayings. Figurative and complex language, idioms, and adages section of the Reader's Guide are going to help you understand unfamiliar sayings. So keep going back to that reading guide. They're posted in the materials. It's there for you to help you understand. And I'm here for you. So if you don't understand something, send me an email. Bring it up in our Zoom meeting. Let me help you clarify. Once you've familiarized yourself with the layout and the content of the Reader's Guide, we're going to review how it can help support you as you read the novel. You should always read the background information first. Having the background information will help you understand the chapter. You should reread sections, glossary, and the figurative language explanations to help you understand words that might be unknown to you in the chapter. Okay, so let's read the historical background information. It's understandable if some of this information may be a bit confusing to you right now. We're at the beginning. It's always a little confusing at the beginning. We're going to keep pushing through. You're going to keep asking questions to clarify your understanding. And somewhere in a couple of chapters, those light bulbs always go off. So don't worry if you're a little confused right now. Many of these facts will be mentioned again. I'll be saying things over and over. And just remember how well you spell Haudenosaunee now. So don't be worried if you don't totally understand. Oh, burning questions. I can't wait to hear your burning questions tonight on Zoom. Bring them with you. Write them down. Ask them to me tonight. Okay, so you're going to turn to page 1 of the Hope Chest. I'm going to continue on with this lesson, assuming that you have listened to me read chapter 1. If you have not, pause the video here, go into my YouTube page, open up chapter 1 of the Hope Chest, and you're going to listen to me read the first 6 pages. Stop the video, go listen to me read the first 6 pages, and then come back and continue the lesson. Okay, welcome back. So now that I've read the first 6 pages, stopping at the top with the address was somewhere in New York City, Henry Street. That's where you're going to pause the video and you're coming back right here. Let's talk about the gist and what's happened so far. So in the first 6 pages, we figure out that Violet is really angry at her parents because they hid letters that her sister Chloe had sent her. I'm going to move my picture over here. We also read just that section of the text again, but this time we're going to use the glossary and figurative language definitions and other vocabulary strategies to help us with unfamiliar words or phrases. So you have 5 minutes to reread 1 through 6 and try to figure out unfamiliar words. What are some reasons, other than hiding Chloe's letters, that Violet was so angry with her parents? Does anybody remember? Think about it. Why else was she so angry? She's angry because they told her to be seen and not heard, and to speak only when spoken to. They sent her sister away, and they stuck her with a brother who didn't talk, and they accused her of stealing her own letters. This is crazy. How did the author let the reader know when Violet was reading a letter? What did you notice in the book? How did we know that Violet was reading a letter? If you said that the fonts changed and they're written in a letter format, then you're correct. In Chloe's letters, she says, "Speaking of soldiers, how is Stephen doing?" Who do you think she's referring to? And why would she ask this? Think about it. If you said that Stephen is their brother who was either sick or hurt from being a soldier in the war, and she was probably worried about him, then you were correct. Okay, so let's think about our homework. So let's review tonight's homework together. You're going to answer text-dependent questions and take notes on the summary notes section of your reader's guide. You are not writing a summary paragraph. Don't write a summary paragraph. Okay. So when we read Eagle Song, there was this thing called somebody in, wanted, but, so, then. You're going to take a character from the story and you're going to fill in the summary notes, not the summary, just the notes. Pick a character from the story and you're filling in the setting, what they wanted, and then the conflict. But, so, then. Just imagine, as soon as you have your person and your place, you're just describing something that happened. What did they want to do? What conflict did they run into? How did they solve that problem? Short, 1 or 2 sentences, nothing crazy. Remember that you need that background information. You need that glossary. You need that reader's guide with you when you read. Here's the glossary. Here's the figurative language. So for homework tonight, you're going to finish reading chapter 1. So come back over to the YouTube, pick up from page 6, and follow me through to the end of the chapter. You're going to record in the summary notes that if, so, then. You're going to answer the 2 text-dependent questions, and you're going to submit them to me on Google Classroom. These are the two text-dependent questions. How did Violet feel about knitting squares for blankets for French orphans? And why did knitting the blanket squares help Violet understand how Chloe felt about being a public health nurse in New York? Submit those to me on Google Classroom. Make sure you filled them in. Read chapter 1 and come to our Zoom lesson with questions, concerns, confusions, anything with chapter 1 of the Hope Chest. I'll see you guys tonight on Zoom at 4 o'clock. Bye.